Rumor had it that the new campus heartthrob, a freshman, was cold and unapproachable. But only I knew the truth. In private, he would cry until his eyes were red and swollen. "Brother, I miss you so much," he sobbed. I glared at him. "How many times do I have to tell you? Boys aren't allowed to cry." Yet later, he pinned me down on the bed, gently wiping away my tears. "But I love watching you cry, brother." After being sick and missing an entire week of school, I returned to find that the freshman's military training was already nearing its end. As soon as class ended, my roommate, Anthony, dragged me aside, eager to gossip. "Have you heard? There's a freshman in the next class who's been unanimously crowned the new campus heartthrob." I was still groggy, having just recovered from illness and suffered through an 8 a.m. class. My brain wasn't fully functioning, so I responded purely on autopilot. "Oh, cold as hell." But Anthony didn't need my engagement. He was on a roll all by himself. "His name's Noel, I think." I was skeptical at first. What kind of guy goes around with a name like that? But then I saw him in person and holy shit, he's gorgeous. He's just unbelievably cold. Total, stay away from me, energy. No idea how many people have already been shot down trying to confess to him. Anthony kept rambling, but my thoughts had already started drifting elsewhere. Gorgeous? I knew someone gorgeous too. But he wasn't cold. If anything, he was a crybaby. If I hadn't been there to protect him, who knows how badly he would have been bullied. At that thought, I sighed, my already unpleasant mood growing even heavier. I wondered how he was doing now. By the time we finished talking, most of the students had already left the classroom. Anthony and I finally headed out. I had been in such a rush to get to class that my suitcase was still sitting downstairs. Anthony had another class soon, so he planned to split off after walking me to the dorms. But just as we were about to part ways, he suddenly grabbed my arm. "Hey, look, over there. That's Noel." I squinted in the direction he was pointing. The blue military training uniform fit him neatly, accentuating his long legs and slender waist with the belt cinched tight around him. As if sensing our gaze, he tilted his head slightly and glanced in our direction. His features were too distant to make out clearly, but even from afar, he was undeniably beautiful. And strangely, familiar. The closer he came, the stronger that sense of familiarity grew. Until, finally, his clear, bright eyes locked onto mine. Eyes that, in my memory, were always brimming with unshed tears. He stopped right in front of me. "Roger?" I stared at him, dumbfounded. Anthony clapped a hand on my shoulder and whispered in my ear, "Holy shit, dude, you know him?" Before I could respond, Noel turned to Anthony. "Senior, can I talk to him for a moment?" "Oh, yeah, sure," Anthony stammered before shooting me a knowing look and scurrying away. I found myself staring at Noel, who had maintained a stony expression the entire time. For the first time, I understood what Anthony meant when he said the guy had a cold personality. I still couldn't believe it. The kid who used to cry over the smallest things, was this really him? Yet before I could even fully process it, his eyes suddenly reddened. Tears welled up and streamed down his face in big, heavy drops. I froze in panic. We were standing right in front of the teaching building, in full view of half the school. And this wasn't just any freshman. This was the campus heartthrob, the subject of endless discussions lately. People were already sneaking glances in our direction. If they saw him crying like this, it would be an absolute disaster. I'd be crucified on the university confession page as the villain of the century. Didn't I care about my reputation at all? That thought jolted me into action. Grabbing my suitcase with one hand and Noel's wrist with the other, I dragged him toward a quieter area. Only after making sure no one else was around did I finally let out a breath of relief. When I turned back, Noel was still crying his eyes out. His face, his nose, even his lips and neck were flushed red. There wasn't a single trace of masculinity in him. I sighed helplessly. "What the hell are you crying for?" He pouted, his voice choked with sobs. "Brother, I missed you." Tears pattered onto the ground, one after another. If this continued, there'd be no stopping him. Thinking fast, I straightened my back and pulled out my old childhood authority. I glared at him fiercely. "How many times have I told you? But Don't cry. Back when we were kids, he'd always stop crying when I said that, albeit with sniffles and teary eyes. But this time, it had no effect. Instead, he burst into even louder sobs and yanked me into his arms. His voice was thick with grievance. But brother, I'm just so happy. It's been so long since we last saw each other. You abandoned me back then. I thought I'd never see you again. Guilt surged through me. A heavy weight pressed against my chest, suffocating. I sighed, reluctant but resigned, and patted his back in comfort. All right, that was my fault. But see? We're together again now. He hummed softly in agreement, his tears soaking through my shoulder. The warmth of his body bled into my skin, reaching deep into my heart. I sighed again, only now realizing he was taller than me. All these years he'd done nothing but grow taller. But his personality? Still exactly the same. The first time I met Noel was back in elementary school. That day, my parents were working late, so I had to walk home alone. I strolled along at a leisurely pace, but as I passed a narrow alley, I heard something unsettling. The sound of a child crying. And other voices, young but cruel. Always crying like a little girl. Actually, you're so pretty. Are you sure you're not a girl? The crying paused. And no, I'm not. The other kids laughed. Oh, just because you say so? Hold him down. I'm gonna pull his pants down and check. I heard a struggle, muffled sobs growing frantic. Fueled by a sense of justice, I marched straight into the alley. Let him go. The leader of the group froze. Who the hell are you? That's not important. I said, let him go. I narrowed my eyes. I'll count to 3. Don't make me repeat myself. 3. The boys exchanged uneasy glances. 2. Their faces paled. 1. Before I even finished, they bolted, disappearing down the alley. Only then did I turn to look at the kid they had been bullying. He was curled up on the ground, his clothes rumpled, his big, teary eyes brimming with unspilled tears. He was hiccuping quietly, trying to hold back his sobs. I clicked my tongue. They're gone. Stop crying. The moment the words left my mouth, fat teardrops began rolling down his cheeks. Some of the dirt on his face was washed away, revealing pale, flawless skin beneath. Even then, he was already stunning. With tears in his eyes, he looked even more delicate and pitiful. If I ignored the fact that he was a boy, I hardened my expression, imitating my father's stern demeanor. A real man doesn't cry. The tears fell even faster. In all my years of life, I had never met someone who could cry as much as he did. Minutes passed, and yet his tears remained as abundant as ever. It was shocking to say the least. In the end, I was the one who admitted defeat first. All right. I'm sorry, little guy. I was wrong, okay? Just stop crying. He hiccuped through his sobs. And no, you weren't wrong. I was exasperated. Then why are you crying? His big, wet eyes blinked at me. Because someone protected me. I'm happy. At that age, I was obsessed with Ultraman. And now, here was this beautiful little kid looking at me with absolute admiration. It made my brain short-circuit. On a whim, I decided to go all in. I made him my little brother. Thanks to the 3-year age gap in my height, which had already outpaced most boys my age, no one dared to bully him after that. But his crying? It didn't lessen at all. If anything, it got worse. Noel once explained to me that he cried so easily because he had an unusually high sensitivity to pain. His tear threshold was abnormally low. Sometimes, he didn't even realize he was crying until the tears had already started falling. At first, he tried to hold them back, afraid to let me see. But over time, it got to the point where even flipping through a book too fast would send him running to me for comfort. That was when I finally understood the meaning of being spoiled rotten. And what could I do? He was my little brother. Of course, I spoiled him. But then, in my first year of high school, my parents applied for a job transfer so I could get a better education. They were reassigned to another city. I had promised Noel we'd go out together the next day. But my mom's transfer orders came in fast, and she was required to report immediately. I called Noel, but he never picked up. So I waited for him. I stood in the snow all night, praying that he'd show up. And, unsurprisingly, I ended up with a high fever. By the time I woke up, I was already thousands of miles away. And I never managed to contact him again. Noticing that I was lost in thought, Noel tightened his arms around me in displeasure. "Brother, what are you thinking about?" "You," I blurted out. His expression softened. "I missed you too." I snapped back to reality, shoving him lightly. "Not like that," I said dryly. "I mean, a few years ago, I went looking for you at your house. Your neighbor said you and your mom had moved away a long time ago. Where have you been all these years?" Noel had grown up in a single-parent household. I'd met his mother before, delicate and frail, her voice carrying the soft lilt of a Jiangnan woman. His tendency to cry must have come from her. But where would two helpless, vulnerable people go? Had they been bullied again in their new home? Had Noel been doing okay all these years? A flood of questions weighed on my chest as I waited for his answer. "We went to live with my biological father," he said quietly. "I got bullied. But I remembered what you taught me. I fought back." Then he smiled through his lingering tears. "I'm doing well now." His grin widened. "Brother, are you worried about me?" "What else?" I scoffed. "I had a little brother who went missing for years. Can't I be worried?" I had barely finished speaking before his barely dried tears welled up again. "What now?" I asked, exasperated. "I'm just happy," he mumbled, tightening his grip around me. "Happy that you care about me." Then, in the next breath, he accused, "But you didn't even recognize me just now." I couldn't help but laugh. "Come on, be reasonable. You were just a little kid back then. Who would have guessed you'd grow up to look like this?" "But I recognized you," he countered, full of righteous indignation. "And I told you my name back then." That hit the sore spot. Because, well, he had told me his name. But he'd been crying so hard that I couldn't understand a word of it. So I made him write it down for me. And then, with all the authority of a big brother, I'd waved my hand and declared, "All right, shove it is. From now on, you're my little brother. Got it?" The nickname had stuck, and by the time I learned enough characters to recognize his real name, I was already too used to calling him Xiao Cha. So when I heard Noel, I hadn't even made the connection. But just as I was about to explain, Noel tilted his head and offered, "I'll forgive you, if you promise me one thing. When you're guilty, anything can seem like a lifeline." And this was coming from the person I owed. "Of course," I said immediately. "What is it?" "Tomorrow's the military training performance. Will you come watch?" He hesitated before adding, "I got chosen as the standard bearer." I agreed without hesitation. "That's it? That's the favor?" As I mulled over how soft-hearted he still was, I couldn't help but smile. The military performance was scheduled for the evening. I had no classes that afternoon, but I did have practice with the school's combat team. As soon as training ended, I grabbed my things and started heading out. Anthony trailed behind me, staring in disbelief. Wait. Are you seriously leaving on time? No extra drills? What the hell happened to you? Were you possessed by some kind of spirit?" I rolled my eyes. "I'm going to watch the military performance." Anthony made a face. "But that thing's boring as hell. Did our instructor force you?" "No, I promised someone." "Oh." He leaned in excitedly. "Is it a girl? Are you dating some cute freshman?" "Spill." "It's not a girl," I corrected. "Actually, you know him. It's Noel." "Oh, Noel? Wait." He paused. Then his eyes widened in horror. "Wait, are you saying you're dating Noel?" His voice was so loud it could have shattered the gym ceiling. Even people on the second floor poked their heads down to see what was going on. I immediately slapped a hand over his mouth and dragged him out. Only when we reached a quiet place did I let go, hissing, "Are you out of your damn mind? He's a guy. What the hell would I be dating him for?" Anthony shrugged. "So what if he's a guy? Can't guys date guys?" I was so shocked that I couldn't even argue back. A vein throbbed in my forehead. After taking a deep breath, I punched him in the shoulder. "Noel is my little brother." I took the time to explain our relationship. Anthony's excitement waned slightly, But he still huffed. Well, you're not actually related. You could still end up together. My fists clenched. I raised them threateningly, and he finally shut up, though not without a pout. Fine, fine, he muttered. But don't say I didn't warn you. Thinking about Noel's soft personality and tendency to cry, I felt a headache coming on. He's too soft, I muttered. I bet he's uncomfortable but won't say anything. He'll just bottle it up and suffer in silence. Speak of the devil. Before I could even finish my thought, Anthony grabbed my arm and pointed toward a small path nearby. Hey, isn't that Noel? I narrowed my eyes, peering through the leaves of a tree that stood between us. Through the gaps in the branches, I could make out his familiar figure. It really was him. Standing in front of him was another student, also dressed in a military training uniform. I instinctively moved to push past the branches and head over, but Anthony stopped me. Wait, he whispered. Let's hear what they're talking about first. I frowned in disapproval. Eavesdropping? What kind of man sneaks around like this? But before I could object, the other student spoke. Noel, I heard from the others. You like guys, right? Then why not give me a chance? I froze mid-step. My mind went blank except for one phrase. You like guys. Like guys. Anthony had been right all along. But what really shocked me came next. The delicate, soft-hearted crybaby I remembered now wore an expression of icy indifference. His rejection was swift and merciless. Jiang Kai, how many times do I have to tell you? I don't like you. I don't want to give you a chance. Are you deaf? If you can't understand human language, then go home. Be a pig. Just don't bother me anymore, okay? I was still processing my shock when Anthony let out a slow whistle. Soft? Bottling things up? He echoed mockingly. I choked on my own words. The conversation continued. But I really like you, the guy insisted. Noel let out a cold laugh. Like me? Don't make me laugh. You've known me for how long? And you think you liked me? And even if you do, why should that mean I have to like you back? Jiang Kai faltered. You like someone else? Noel didn't hesitate. Yeah. His voice was firm. A senior. Someone I've liked since I was a kid. Not just as a brother, but as the person I want to love. His name is Roger. It was like a bolt of lightning out of nowhere. Not only was the guy confessing to Noel left stunned, but I, the eavesdropper, was completely floored. Anthony, on the other hand, recovered the fastest. He threw an arm over my shoulder. And you swore you weren't dating? Little brother? What little brother? Sounds more like a boyfriend to me. Man, I can't believe you. If you're in a relationship, just say it. I wouldn't judge. But keeping it a secret even from your brother? That's low, dude. Then, as if struck by another realization, he squinted at me suspiciously. Wait, hold up, so who's the top and who's the bottom? You're the bottom, right? You're the damn bottom. I snapped back instinctively. The words were out before I even registered what I was saying. Then I realized. What the hell am I even saying? I don't like guys. Anthony clicked his tongue and gave me a knowing look. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to jump into the Yellow River and still not be able to wash yourself clean. What a mess. A complete, absolute mess. And worst of all, I had no idea when Noel started feeling this way about me. Or if this was even real. How could Noel feel that way about me? My emotions were all over the place. I couldn't even tell what I was feeling anymore. By the time I snapped out of my daze, Noel had already noticed me. Through the gaps in the tree leaves, our eyes met. His expression froze. Brother? What are you? Before he could finish, his brows furrowed. He strode over, grabbed my arm, and yanked me out from under Anthony's grip. Anthony stumbled but didn't get the chance to complain before Noel cut him off with a sharp remark. Senior, don't you shower after training? You're covered in sweat, and now you've gotten it all over my brother. His tone was pointed. I subtly pulled my arm from his grip. He was training with me. He didn't have time to shower because he came to find me first, I said calmly. If you don't like it, you can stand farther away. I'm sweaty too. But Noel just smiled sweetly. I don't mind, brother. I let out a quiet sigh, then turned to Anthony. I need to talk to Noel. I'll find you later. Anthony gave me an exaggerated look before nodding. All right. With that he left, and the area around us emptied. Noel immediately took a step closer, as if about to drape himself over me. I instinctively took half a step back. He paused. His eyes instantly turned misty. But his earlier words still echoed in my head, and for once, I wasn't in the mood to comfort him. All I felt was frustration, deep, unshakable frustration. I crossed my arms and exhaled sharply. Before you start crying, explain something to me first. Noel sniffled, tilting his head. Explain what? I met his gaze. What did you mean by liking guys? And more importantly, what did you mean by liking me? He froze. You heard all of that? The moment the words left his lips, tears spilled from his eyes. I clenched my jaw. Yeah. I heard everything. I took a deep breath. And you really are something, huh? Acting all soft and fragile in front of me, but behind my back, you're throwing out lines like that? How long were you planning on keeping this from me? I ran a hand through my hair in frustration. Noel, are you out of your damn mind? I've been your brother for years, and now you tell me that you... I couldn't even finish the sentence. I shut my mouth and turned away. Forget it. I need a couple of days to cool down. You can explain yourself then. I moved to leave, but Noel grabbed my wrist. Brother, don't go. His voice cracked. It's not what you think, please don't be mad. He was panicking. His words tumbled out in a rush. They wouldn't stop chasing me. The girls, the guys, they wouldn't leave me alone. I didn't know what to do, so I said I liked guys, hoping they'd back off. He hiccuped, desperately trying to get me to understand. But it just made things worse. The guys started chasing me too. I didn't know what else to do, so I brought you up. The fire in my chest was instantly doused. But for some reason, I still felt irritated. I didn't know why. I looked at his tear-streaked face, his red-rimmed eyes, and felt something I couldn't name. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't know you'd be upset. He tried to smile, but it was wobbly at best. It's okay. I won't say it anymore. I'll just deal with it. It's fine, really. His tears kept falling. He wiped at them roughly, but they only came faster. Finally, he let out a small, self-deprecating laugh. Brother, don't be mad. Don't ignore me, okay? I didn't respond. He gazed at me, the light in his eyes dimming, his grip on my sleeve loosening. Brother, I'll explain everything, I promise. Then, as if finally making up his mind, he turned to leave. But before he could take a step, I exhaled. I let you go yet? His whole body tensed. I sighed, took 2 steps forward, and hooked an arm around his neck. I roughly wiped his face with my sleeve, then casually rubbed the damp spot against his pristine military uniform. All right, I was wrong for blaming you. Now stop crying, okay? Noel froze. His wide eyes locked onto mine, stunned. You're not mad? Why would I be mad? Didn't you say it was all a misunderstanding, my dear little boyfriend? Oh, boyfriend. I clicked my tongue. Didn't you say it yourself? That you used me to get rid of those pests? I did, but what? I smirked. So what if I pretend to be your boyfriend? It's not like I plan on dating anyone anyway. A little gossip won't kill me. What? Are you unhappy with the arrangement? And no, not at all. Fresh tears welled up in his eyes, but before I could scold him, he quickly wiped them away. Brother, I swear I wasn't trying to cry. I'm just really happy. I clicked my tongue again. Happy about what? You're my little brother. Protecting you is only natural. But I don't want to be just. A car drove by at that moment, drowning out his last words. I frowned. What did you say? But he only shook his head. It's nothing. Brother, can I ask for one little favor? Say it. He hesitated, then cautiously said, Can you keep a little more distance from Anthony? I frowned at that. Anthony was my roommate and teammate in the combat club. We were naturally close. I couldn't understand why Noel would ask me something like that. Why? I asked directly. He hesitated again before answering. If you're too close, people might misunderstand and think you're dating. I waved my hand dismissively. Come on, who would think that? We're just brothers. Then I remembered. Noel's relentless male admirers. Anthony's easy acceptance of any and all relationships. My words caught in my throat. All right, I sighed. I'll listen to you. It wasn't like I was worried about Anthony's orientation, I already knew about it. But for the sake of appearances, and now that I was technically Noel's boyfriend, fake or not, I figured I should at least be mindful. Better to avoid unnecessary trouble. After that, I accompanied Noel to his military training performance. Only then did I realize he hadn't been lying about being a standard bearer. But what he didn't mention was that he was leading the entire standard bearer unit. The crisp military uniform made him look impossibly sharp and disciplined. His movements were clean, precise, flawless. And his face? A deadly weapon. Every time he turned his head, a wave of screams erupted from the crowd. When it finally ended, a few bold girls rushed up to ask for his number. Noel didn't respond. Instead, he turned, caught sight of me, and broke into a dazzling smile. He ran straight toward me, grabbed my hand without hesitation. I stiffened. Before I could react, he pulled me close and whispered, "Brother, boyfriend." Then I remembered what I had promised him earlier. Suppressing the strange discomfort in my chest, I nodded. Grinning, boldly held my hand and turned back to the girl. "Sorry," he said. "I already have a boyfriend." That night, the school confession page exploded with the news. People mourned the loss of their campus heartthrob, lamenting that he was already taken. But the effect was undeniable, his admirers backed off. And Noel? He was smiling more than ever. Holding hands, hugging, it was nothing really. I got used to it. And if it meant peace and quiet for Noel, then it was worth it. But peace didn't last long. One day, out of nowhere, Noel asked, "Brother, what if I actually liked guys? What would you think?" I paused. "Why are you suddenly asking this?" He shrugged. "I just feel like two guys being together isn't so bad." Then, as if regretting bringing it up, he waved a hand. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." But while he brushed it off easily, I couldn't. That night, I had a dream. In it, there were flushed cheeks, red-rimmed eyes, burning tears. My breath hitched. I cursed under my breath. "Roger, you're a goddamn bastard." I told myself it was just a coincidence. Dreams reflected thoughts, nothing more. Totally normal. But when I started paying attention, I realized the signs had been there all along. The way my heart pounded whenever he got close. The way my mood instantly lifted whenever I thought of him. I stopped lying to myself. I was a bastard. A goddamn bastard who had fallen for his own little brother. But how could I not? Noel, so beautiful, so cold to everyone else, only ever looked at me with teary eyes, trusting me completely, depending on me alone. Who could resist that? Because I sure as hell couldn't. I crushed an empty beer can in my hand and tossed it into the trash. The metal clanked loudly against the plastic bin, snapping me back to reality. But so what if I liked him? I couldn't actually do anything about it. I let out a bitter laugh and sighed for what felt like the 100th time. For the first time, I rejected Noel's invitation to walk home together after class. My excuse? Too busy studying. But I didn't expect him to wait for me outside the dorm. When I finally showed up, I reeked of alcohol, nowhere near the studious image I had pretended to have. It was obvious I had been lying. Noel teared up immediately. The tears fell one after another. None of them touched me, but I still felt them. I squeezed my eyes shut, frustration bubbling over. Crying, 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 that's all you ever do. I snapped. How many times do I have to tell you? A real man doesn't cry. If you cry again, don't bother coming to me ever again. Everything I had bottled up, every frustration, every restless thought, exploded. Noel choked back a sob. "Brother, I won't cry anymore," he whispered. "But, please don't tell me not to come to you." He tried. He tried so hard not to cry, but his teary eyes gave him away. It made things worse. Made me worse. I wanted to wipe those tears away. But I forced myself to stay still. I shut my eyes and, with the help of liquid courage, said the words I had been holding back. No, you're grown up now. You can't keep running to me for everything. But you're my brother. I'm not your real brother. But you're still my boyfriend. That's fake. But we've held hands. We've hugged. That was all just an act. I took a deep breath. If any of that made you misunderstand, then I'm sorry. That's on me. I originally thought that between two straight guys, it wouldn't mean anything. Straight. Noel cut me off. So, it's because of what I said that night, isn't it? I didn't answer, but he must have seen the truth in my silence. A bitter smile stretched across his lips. I get it now, brother. I'm sorry. He wiped his tears with trembling hands. Don't worry, I won't keep clinging to you anymore. I got what I wanted, distance. So why did it feel so awful? Even Anthony, oblivious as he usually was, noticed something was off with me. That night he brought back a pack of beer. He handed me one, then cracked open one for himself. All right, spill it, he said. What's got you all messed up? Family? Friendship? Or love? I popped open my can but said nothing. Anthony took a sip and smirked. Oh, it's love. So, what happened? Did you and Noel have a fight? I kicked him. Bullshit. What does this have to do with Noel? Oh, damn, still in denial? Fine. Your dear little brother, Helen. What did you fight about? I gulped down a mouthful of beer. Is it that obvious? I muttered. Obvious what? I hesitated for a second, then finally admitted. Oh, like Noel. Anthony blinked. Wait, what? I thought he was just your little brother. Anthony, I growled, aiming another kick, but he dodged it. Whoa, why so angry? Hit a nerve. He grinned, annoying me even more. I downed the rest of my beer in frustration and grabbed another. Anthony finally sobered up a little, sensing my mood. He set his drink down and looked at me seriously. You know, he said, between the two of you, I always thought it was more obvious that Noel liked you. I froze. What? Anthony raised an eyebrow. You seriously never noticed? The whole campus calls him an untouchable ice prince. But have you seen the way he acts around you? I frowned. That's because he sees me as his older brother. Anthony scoffed. Alright then. Remember the time we caught him rejecting that guy? I nodded. Do you also remember how pissed he got when I just barely touched you? He practically wanted me exiled from the city. He's a germaphobe. Right. And he holds my hand and hugs me all the time because I'm pretending to be his boyfriend. Roger, you're a fucking idiot. Anthony let out a deep sigh and ran a hand through his hair. So when you two inevitably kiss and end up in bed, are you gonna tell me that's just natural impulse, too? I lowered my eyes. For a long time, I said nothing. Then, finally, in a voice so quiet it was almost inaudible, I said, yeah. Anthony sucked in a sharp breath. You are so fucking beyond saving. I refused to back down. You don't get it. He only sees me as his brother. I took another long sip, the carbonation burning my throat. Noel had said it himself. He didn't want me as a lover. He wanted me as his brother. Forever. Back then, Noel was still small, his features delicate. He followed me everywhere, calling out, brother, brother, all day long. The neighbors used to tease us. Hey, isn't that Roger's little wife? Every time, I would frown and correct them. Xiao Xiao is a boy. He's nobody's wife. But one day, Noel came to me with a puzzled expression. Brother, can a man be someone's wife? I tensed. Who said something to you? Tell me and I'll go set them straight. He shook his head. Not me. I saw Shen, the guy who lives at the alley entrance. The other day, he brought a man home, and everyone said it was his wife. I stiffened. I knew about that. I just hadn't expected Noel to notice. After a moment of thought, I explained, wife isn't the right word. If you like girls, your partner will be a woman. If you like boys, your partner will be a man. It just depends on who you love. Noel didn't even hesitate. Then if I love brother, does that mean you're my partner? I laughed. That's different. A brother is a brother. A partner is like mom and dad's relationship. He instantly shook his head. Then no. I don't want you as my partner. I like you, but I just want you to be my brother. Forever. Back then I had only found it amusing. But now, remembering it made my chest ache. I tried to push my feelings back into that brother role. I told myself to keep my distance. But when I saw someone else standing beside Noel, the sour taste in my mouth was undeniable. And it was even worse when I recognized who. Brian, our class president, and the head of Noel's student organization. I had just finished lunch when I ran into them walking side by side. They were close, whispering about something. Noel was smiling so brightly that his eyes nearly disappeared. A kind of happiness I had never seen before. Of course. Whenever he saw me, he was too busy crying to smile. I swallowed down my bitterness and forced myself to act normal. Hey, I greeted. Noel's smile disappeared instantly. Brother, he mumbled, looking miserable. That only irritated me more. I turned to Brian. You too heading somewhere? Brian chuckled. Yeah, we were busy all morning and didn't have time to eat. Noel said he was hungry, so we're grabbing lunch. Want to join us? Noel was a germaphobe. He never liked sharing meals with people he wasn't close to. But now, seemed like he had adapted just fine. I bit back my thoughts and smiled. Nah, I just ate. Got plans anyway. Without looking at Noel, I turned and left. I had barely walked a few steps when Brian called after me. My birthday's tomorrow. Wanna come? I was about to refuse. But then I caught sight of Noel from the corner of my eye. I hesitated. Then, forcing a smile, I said, sure. Brian's birthday party was held at a lounge. A bar downstairs, a hotel upstairs. Because my advisor had called me in last minute, I arrived late. By then, the party was already in full swing. Brian was popular, and the place was packed. But even in the crowd, I spotted Noel immediately. His cheeks were flushed. Drunk. The light flickered across his face, illuminating his features in a way that was almost unreal. Breathtaking. If I ignored the fact that he was curled up in Brian's arms. Before my brain could even process it, my body had already moved. I strode over in just a few steps, heart hammering in my chest. Brian raised an eyebrow at me. Roger? You're finally here? Bad timing. Noel just drank too much and passed out. I was about to take him upstairs to rest. I blocked his hand as he reached to support Noel. I'll take him, I said firmly. It's your birthday. The host can't just disappear and leave the guests behind. Brian hesitated, but I didn't give him a chance to argue. I pulled Noel into my arms. And the moment I did, I realized something was wrong. His body was burning. His breath came in short, shallow pants. The second he was in my embrace, he clung to me like a drowning man to driftwood, mumbling only one word. Hot. My gaze snapped to Brian. What the hell did you do to him? Brian's expression darkened. His brows furrowed as he took in Noel's state, and for the first time, I saw real concern in his eyes. It wasn't an act. Which meant, it wasn't him. My mind raced through the faces in the room, but I came up blank. As if reading my thoughts, Brian leaned in and muttered, I'll find out who did this. But right now, we need to take care of Noel. He's barely holding on. As if on cue, Noel whimpered and began fumbling with his shirt buttons, desperate to rid himself of the heat. I caught his hands just in time. Brian slipped a hotel key card into my palm. Upstairs. Hurry. I gritted my teeth. Fine. I tossed Noel onto the bed the moment we got to the room and rushed to the bathroom, turning on the cold water in the tub. It wouldn't fix everything, but it might at least make him feel better. But before the tub could even fill halfway, a body pressed against my back. Scorching. I tensed. Instinctively, I reached back to push him off, but my fingers met bare skin. My breath hitched. Noel had stripped completely. And the moment our skin touched, he let out a sharp gasp. I froze. Noel, I forced out, let go of me. The cold water will help. Just a little longer, okay? His lashes fluttered as he cracked his eyes open. Brother? His voice was dazed. Yeah, I exhaled. It's me. So let go. I waited for him to loosen his grip. He didn't. Instead, he shoved me hard. I lost my footing and fell straight into the ice-cold tub. The freezing water soaked through my clothes instantly, sending a violent shiver down my spine. But before I could recover, Noel followed. The tub was too small for two grown men, forcing our bodies flush against each other. And Noel, burning up from whatever drug was in his system, was hotter than ever. The stark contrast made me tremble involuntarily. That seemed to trigger something in him. He cupped my jaw. Brother, why are you shaking? I opened my mouth to curse, but before I could, he kissed me. It was a collision, not a caress. It stole the breath from my lungs, sent my brain reeling. This wasn't the Noel I knew. The always obedient, soft-spoken Noel had been replaced by something wild, desperate, hungry. His teeth grazed my lower lip, stinging enough to pull me back to my senses. I shoved him away. Noel blinked, his pupils blown wide, his breath uneven. Then, the moment the distance settled between us, he surged forward again, grabbing at my hair to pull me back in. I gritted my teeth. And for the first time, I raised my hand. A sharp crack echoed in the bathroom. Noel stilled. So did I. My palms stung from the slap, but I barely noticed. I wiped the blood off my lips, voice rough. Noel, snap out of it. He didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Instead, he looked at me with such raw desperation that my stomach twisted. I know exactly what I'm doing, brother. His voice was hoarse. I'm kissing you. You're not in your right mind. You're just drugged. It's not the drug. He cut me off. His hands trembled as they cupped my face. Brother, you don't understand. I've wanted this for so long. My breath caught. Noel swallowed hard. I love you. I love you so much it's driving me insane. I dream about you. I think about you every second. I only pretended to need a fake boyfriend because I couldn't stand watching you be close to anyone else. Then, as if something inside him snapped, his tears finally spilled over. But I didn't know. I didn't know it would make things hard for you. I'm sorry, brother. He cut himself off. He scrambled back, pulling himself out of the tub. Reaching out, but never quite touching, he hovered, unsure. I didn't mean to make things worse, he choked out. He turned away abruptly. Just go, he whispered. I clenched my jaw. If I leave, what about you? Don't worry about me. His voice was thick with emotion, raw and broken. Brother, please. Before I lose control again. I hesitated. Then I stood, water dripping from my clothes, Noel's tear-streaked face blurring in my vision. My mind replayed his words over and over. His voice. His confession. His tears. I reached up, yanked my wet shirt over my head, and took a step forward. Then another. Then I pulled him into my arms. Ignoring his protests, I kissed his shoulder, his neck. His breath hitched. I lifted his chin and whispered, "What if I told you? I love you too." The moment the words left my lips, it was like striking a match to dry kindling. The drug was already working through him, amplifying everything. We crashed onto the bed, feverish hands pulling at clothes, mouths meeting in frenzied urgency. Somewhere in the haze, I grabbed a pack of supplies from the hotel nightstand. That was when Noel suddenly hesitated. Brother, does it hurt? I stilled. Then softer, don't worry. I'll be gentle. He didn't look convinced. But I read online that it hurts a lot. I let out a slow breath. Before I could say anything, his lip trembled. And then, the tears started again. Brother, I'm scared, he sniffled. Can you be nice to me? Tears trickled down his flushed cheeks, soaking into the sheets beneath him. It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And yet, my heart softened instantly. I swallowed hard. After a long moment, I sighed. Fine, I muttered. But I'm on top. Noel didn't even hesitate before nodding. His voice was steady, firm. Okay. Only later did I realize. Thank God Noel was a crybaby. And thank God I had a soft spot for him. 'Cause, holy shit, it hurt. And the worst part? Noel still cried louder than I did. I buried my face in his shoulder and groaned. I'm the one in pain. Why the hell are you crying? He sniffled, hiccuping through his sobs. I see, can't help it. When I woke up the next morning, I was still in Noel's arms. The moment my eyes fluttered open, he nuzzled my cheek with his chin. Brother, you're finally awake. Without thinking, I smacked him. And, predictably, he started crying. I groaned in frustration. Crying. Do you ever do anything else? Cut it out. He sniffled, voice trembling. But, brother, that hurt. If you're so delicate, why didn't you listen to me last night? He hesitated, then, instead of answering, he muttered, but I never told you to stop crying either. Memories from last night hit me all at once. My face burned. But he hadn't told me to stop crying. Because he loved it. I shot him an irritated look. Noel only chuckled and pulled me closer. Brother, this doesn't feel real. What doesn't? Just a while ago, you were telling me to stop clinging to you. And now we're together. He paused. Do you really like me, brother? When did you start liking me? If you like me, why don't you want to cuddle? Then, I clamped a hand over his mouth. Enough. Stop talking. Memories of childhood resurfaced. I narrowed my eyes at him. You're the one who said you didn't want to be my lover. You only wanted me as your brother, for life. He opened his mouth, then suddenly froze. His expression turned strange. Wait, don't tell me. His sentence trailed off, but I instantly realized what he meant. You idiot. I snapped. Do you think I had feelings for a kid? Before he could argue, a sudden ringing cut through the air. He frowned and picked up his phone. The screen flashed a name, Brian. Noel answered. You guys awake? Came Brian's voice. Yeah. What's up? We found the bastard who drugged you last night. Brian was still at the lounge, waiting for us with a group of people. He even sent over some fresh clothes. When we arrived, he greeted us with a teasing smirk. So, how was last night? Noel shot him a cold glance. Brian immediately shut up. I blinked. So this was the untouchable ice prince everyone talked about. Interesting. Brian waved his hand, and his men dragged in a stranger. I didn't recognize him. But Noel's expression darkened. One of David's men? Brian nodded. Wait a few days, then deal with him and send him back, Noel ordered. Brian nodded again. The guy was hauled away, and in just a few minutes, I was left standing there, utterly confused. I nudged Noel. Who the hell is David? Before he could answer, Brian leaned in. He hasn't told you about his real background yet? I shook my head. I turned to Noel. He shot Brian a warning glare, then looked back at me with an expression so soft it was almost pitiful. Brother, I wasn't hiding it to deceive you, he said gently. I was just worried about your safety. But I'll tell you everything now. And that was how I learned the truth. Noel's biological father was from an elite aristocratic family. A man with no legal wife, no legitimate heir, only a handful of illegitimate children. When Noel was brought back into the family, he had to fight tooth and nail against the others for the inheritance. Brian's family had long been allies with his. Last night, one of Noel's competitors had drugged him, intending to frame him with Brian. The Liu family, the one Noel was meant to inherit, was nothing like the messy David family. They would never accept an heir who liked men. Losing Brian's support would have been a devastating blow. But then I showed up. Hearing all of this, I reached out and gently cupped his face. That must have been exhausting, I murmured. He stilled. Then, like a cat seeking warmth, he rubbed against my palm. It is exhausting, he admitted softly. But when I think about how, once this is over, I can be with brother openly. He smiled. It's all worth it. The inheritance battle ended the year I graduated. At my graduation ceremony, I spotted Noel in the audience. He had grown even more composed and mature. But the moment he saw me, he still lit up like a child, eager to be spoiled. Brother, you looked so cool up there. Brian walked over and grinned. Who's cooler, me or him? Before Noel could answer, Anthony kicked Brian in the shin. Do you even need to ask, dumbass? I chuckled. Noel, however, tugged at my sleeve, pouting. Brother, you're not even looking at me. I ruffled his hair, amused. You're so needy. After the ceremony, we went home. A year ago, I had finally come clean to my parents about Noel. They had been furious at first. But Noel was Noel, ridiculously good-looking, absurdly sweet-talking, and stupidly diligent. Within 6 months, he had completely won them over. By then, we had already moved out of the dorms and into our own place. The moment we stepped inside, Noel grabbed my face and kissed me, stumbling toward the bedroom. I smirked, flipping him onto the bed before he could make another move. David, I murmured against his lips. When are you gonna let me try? He hesitated. Then suddenly, tears welled up in his eyes. I cursed under my breath. God damn it. Noel blinked up at me teary-eyed. But brother, I'm scared it'll hurt. I exhaled, pressing my forehead against his. I'll be gentle. But online, they all said it hurts a lot. And just like that, the tears started falling. Tears soaked into the sheets as he looked up at me, wide-eyed and helpless. The resolve I had a moment ago? Gone. Utterly obliterated. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Fine, I relented. But I'm on top. Noel immediately nodded. Okay. Later, I would be extremely grateful for this decision. 'Cause, holy shit, it hurt like hell. And the worst part? Noel still cried louder than me. I groaned, burying my face in his shoulder. I'm the one in pain, I muttered. Why the hell are you crying? He sniffled. I see, can't help it.
Thanks for stopping by. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos.